Happy Halloween, everyone! I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of buns, and welcome once again to Zen Movies, where I take a look at one of the numerous different films in my collection. Subsequently, welcome back, my friends, to Zenoween. Over the course of this spoopy month, we have discussed monster-themed video games and a film centered around taking down a group of monsters. However, October isn't just about monsters we can relate to or monsters we can defeat. It's about that terror that stems from evil we cannot begin to comprehend. It's about killers we cannot hope to defeat who make us lie awake at night, hoping that they never find us in the safety of our homes. Today, we're going to dive into one of the defining monsters of cinema that still gives me chills to this day. Let's take a look at the Boogeyman as we dive into the 1978 classic, John Carpenter's Halloween. Halloween may not have been the first slasher film. That honor can arguably be given to Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, but it was instrumental in popularizing the genre and putting horror films back on the map. Horror has always been a bit of a roller coaster when it comes to popularity. In the early days of film, the Universal monsters were a huge hit and drew attention to figures that resonate with audiences to this day. Vampires, werewolves, and mummies were all given a platform thanks to the Universal monsters and are still relatively well regarded to this day. At the same time, not many people remember the other Universal monsters, even though they were a hit at the time. The Invisible Man, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and Frankenstein all have waned in popularity over the years, and there are far less films dedicated to their exploits these days. A large part of this is due to the campy nature of some of these villains and the oversaturation of Universal monsters with the insane number of sequels they spawned, but I also think that a portion of the blame is that audiences at the time wanted something different. Horror is a niche genre in and of itself, but the Universal monsters were all creatures that could be defeated, and perhaps audiences craved something new at the time. Popularity faded, and studios moved on to other projects, leaving these monsters in the dust. While there were plenty of other horror films produced in the next few decades, the next successful phase of horror could plausibly be said to have been helmed by Alfred Hitchcock. While many people would simply refer to his films as thrillers, much of his work focused on more realistic horror. The birds presented a very real danger that people could face if birds did decide to attack. No, Birdemic doesn't count, that's just laughable. Hitchcock was a master of suspense, and that also translates to terror as well. Rebecca, Rear Window, Rope, and especially Psycho focus on things that could happen in the real world that could frighten us without relying on a monster. Although, one could argue that the monsters in this case were the men who committed these murders. We never really got a huge amount of insight into the murderers themselves, but Hitchcock showed in these films that horror wasn't dead. It was merely going under a different label to appease audiences at the time. Enter the 1970s, where horror finally began a new age in cinema. This decade marked the true transition from classic to modern horror, where films began to center more on aggressiveness, ruthlessness, and social themes of the time. The 1970s were referred to as the golden age of horror because this is where the grand majority of well-known franchises began. The critical reception and popularity of Rosemary's Baby in 1968 led the industry to change as we now saw more supernatural horror and occult themes. Comedy horror saw a resurgence with the likes of Young Frankenstein and Rocky Horror Picture Show, and British horror saw success with Wicker Man. There was such a huge boom of different horror ideas going around, and that led to some interesting experiments. During this decade, we also saw the debut of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Hills Have Eyes, which laid the foundation for the slasher genre. These two films paved the way for John Carpenter to create Halloween in 1978. Now, I'm sure most of you know who John Carpenter is by now, but for those who aren't aware, Carpenter is a legendary director, creating some of the most celebrated films in the industry. While most of his films were initially critical and commercial flops, with a few notable exceptions, his work has gained cult classic status today, and he's renowned as a highly influential filmmaker with movies such as The Thing, They Live, Big Trouble in Little China, Escape from New York, and Starman, just to name a few. At the time though, John Carpenter was a relatively unknown director. He had received some praise from his second film, Assault on Precinct 13, but this was his big break as a director. He was handed a budget of $320,000, which was incredibly small for the time when the average film budget was $5 million. None of the people working on this film expected it to be anything more than an independent horror film. There were no big names attached to the project at the time. There was an incredibly small budget and nobody really expected it to go anywhere, although they just had a lot of fun making it. However, because of this major horror revival, a lot of filmmakers and producers at the time were clamoring to make a product no matter how low budget. In the behind-the-scenes commentary on the Blu-ray, John Carpenter states, "We were a little army making a film, just a bunch of kids trying to make a movie." In that sense, it's crazy how this film went on to make $70 million at the box office, making it one of the highest-grossing independent films at the time. This success dwarfs Saw, Cloverfield, and many other success stories I've covered on this show. It's just insane, especially back in 1978 when 70 million meant a lot more than today. Inspired by such films as Psycho and Bob Clark's Black Christmas, Halloween took the foundation laid down by Texas Chainsaw and The Hills Have Eyes and created what many people consider to be the first slasher film. Independent film producer Irwin Yablans and financier Mustafa Akkad sought out Carpenter to direct a film about a psychotic killer that stalked babysitters, which, funnily enough, had the film originally named The Babysitter Murders, stating that he wanted to create a film that had the same impact as 1973's The Exorcist. After thinking it over, Yablans suggested setting the film on Halloween night and changed the name of the film to Halloween after discovering that Halloween had surprisingly never been used in the title of a film before. Carpenter then approached Bob Clark, the director of Black Christmas, asking if he would ever do a sequel to the movie, to which Clark said that he wasn't really interested. In a later interview, Clark explained that he was through with horror and that he didn't want it to be his defining genre. He stated that Carpenter didn't copy Black Christmas, as he wrote the script, directed the script, and did all of the casting. Halloween was Carpenter's movie. Carpenter liked Black Christmas and may have been influenced by it, but in no way did John Carpenter copy the idea. Other people at the time may have thought to do a movie movie called Halloween, but the script came to John with that title on it. It was an interesting coincidence and a stroke of luck that all these things happened simultaneously, but everything came together to create a film that has lasted the test of time. What is it about Halloween that resonated with audiences so much at the time? Well, let's take a closer look at Halloween and find out. Well, everybody, it seems we have some minor technical difficulties today. There's a massive thunderstorm outside, and it appears to have knocked out the power. That's okay though, I can improvise. Let's work with what we have, right? Halloween tells the story of Michael Myers, a man who murdered his sister when he was only 6 years old and thus was sent to an insane asylum. 15 years later, after a freak storm hits the asylum, Myers escapes and starts to kill again. It's up to Dr. Sam Loomis, Myers' psychiatrist, to track down Myers and end the killing spree once and for all. However, before Loomis can even arrive at the town, Myers encounters a girl named Laurie Strode, who reminds him of the sister he once murdered. He begins to stalk Laurie, picking off her friends one by one until Laurie has to defend herself against the monster behind the mask. At its heart, Halloween is about an unstoppable monster killing people in gruesome ways, but what makes this work is that it takes its time to build to that point. Instead of killing off characters left and right, Halloween spends over half its running time showing us these characters living out their lives while all the while Myers watches from a distance. I've heard some people claim that this is boring, but honestly, I find it incredibly suspenseful. You never know when Myers is going to strike, and he continues to get bolder and closer to Laurie, sometimes getting close enough to hear his breathing behind the mask. The atmosphere is chilling, and the entire time your hair stands on end, anticipating that moment when somebody will get killed off. In addition to this, there are several sequences where characters deny the presence of Myers, making us think that it could all be in Laurie's imagination. The way Myers seems to disappear and teleport around gives the idea that perhaps he isn't real, or maybe he's not human after all. There's this underlying mystery here that never really gets answered, and that is all thanks to Carpenter. Carpenter is a master of suspense, and that first half of the film cements that fact because you never get a chance to rest. You always feel uneasy watching the events unfold, and that's not easy to pull off. During the second half of the film, Myers finally strikes, and the payoff is incredibly worth it. By this time, we've gotten invested in these characters, and we want to see them win, making their deaths far more tragic. The second half is a thrill ride, with Myers acting as a force of nature and the teens doing their best to survive against this lunatic. It's one hell of a climax, and the final battle between Laurie and Myers is one of the most realistic and best choreographed fights in film history. You really feel that these characters are pushed to their physical limits, and every single attack feels like it could be the last. Now let's discuss the ending of the film. For those of you who haven't seen the film yet, please skip to this time code to avoid spoilers. Throughout the climax, Laurie strikes Myers again and again with blows that should have killed him, but only slowed him down. Knitting needle to the fucking neck, he comes back. Coat hanger to the eye, stunned but not dead. Knife to the chest, he appears to be dead, but then sits back up in one of the best damn shots of the movie. Then, as Myers begins to get the upper hand and starts choking Laurie to death, Loomis rushes in and shoots him multiple times until he falls out of the window and lies on the ground motionless. Laurie exclaims, "It was the boogeyman," to which Loomis replies, "As a matter of fact, it was." As these words echo in the air, they look out the window to find Myers has disappeared with only heavy breathing where he was before. The breathing grows louder as Laurie starts to cry, and the film ends on a shot of the house as the breathing grows even louder, seeming to come from the house itself. The ending of the film makes it very clear what direction they were going for with Myers as a villain. Myers is not killed in the end, no matter what they do, and that ending is sheer terror for me because it is showing Myers' true colors. Whatever happened to him when he was 6, Myers truly died that day. What remained, as Loomis said earlier in the film, is not human. The series classifies him as the boogeyman, but Myers truly is a force of nature. Earlier in the film, when Laurie is in class, there's a scene that sums up what Carpenter wanted for the film. They mentioned an author who described fate as a natural element that was immovable like a mountain, and Myers seems to personify this force. Carpenter wanted to go against the grain of horror films that came before, where it was explained who the killer was or how he became the way he is. With that end shot, Carpenter was saying he's gone, but he's still everywhere, and he decided to end it there because keeping the audience guessing was better than saying he was cursed by some force. Much like the teleporting and focus on only Laurie being able to see him, this ending was there to keep the suspense going long after you left the theater. It is a brilliant ending to a simple story that was told in a superb way. Just from the story alone, Halloween is a triumph on many levels. While fully embracing many of the slasher tropes it helped to later popularize, it sets itself apart from the sea of imitators that followed with its unique pacing, build-up, and payoffs that truly kept you on the edge of your seat and guessing who or what this force of nature truly was. I'm okay. I'm okay. It's just a bit of thunder and lightning, nothing to be afraid of. I'm safe here in the apartment, and nothing is out to get me. I'm fine. I'm fine. In any case, I think it's time to discuss the characters, starting with the main villain of the film, Michael Myers. Michael Myers is a horror icon, plain and simple. While he isn't the original horror icon, that title going to Bela Lugosi's Dracula, Myers succeeded in reinvigorating the idea of the horror icon. Instead of following the formula of the Universal monsters, the Alfred Hitchcock thrillers, or even some of his contemporaries, Myers charted his own territory. Myers is the physical embodiment of the boogeyman, an unstoppable force of nature that only comes out on Halloween. Unlike Dracula or the Wolfman, he doesn't have a weakness. He can't be bought off, and he can't be reasoned with. You simply can't fight him. You can't escape from him. He exists to punish those that he feels deserves it. That is what makes Myers so scary to me as a character. While I do like the classic monsters, they all felt too human to me. Myers is not human. He's been taken over by this force of nature, and while his victims put up a good fight, ultimately he comes out on top in the end. Carpenter got the inspiration for Myers by visiting a mental hospital when he was younger and seeing a schizophrenic patient staring blankly at him without any hint of emotion. He didn't say a word, and that creeped out Carpenter so much that he made this the entire inspiration for the villain of this film. For me, the fear comes from just how silent he is. He doesn't scream or growl or laugh maniacally or spout one-liners. All he does is stalk his victims silently and stare at them from afar. And that stare creeps me out far more than any classic monster ever did. Myers is also a faceless monster. The mask he wears over his face conceals everything except for his eyes, which appear to be nothing more than empty black circles. He's lost anything that identifies him as human in this regard. Humans look to other people's faces in order to identify them. But if you take that away and hide that person behind a mask, fear sets in. Fear of what lies behind that mask. And the brilliance of Halloween is that we never truly see what lies behind the mask. There is a brief point near the end where it comes off for a fraction of a second, but Myers quickly pulls it back on as if the mask itself is his face. They even credit Myers as the shape at the end of the film to complete the illusion that Myers isn't human, and I simply love it. All of these points come together to make Myers a timeless villain and the true star of the film. Every time he's on screen, I simply can't look away. Myers is one of my favorite horror icons, and this film fully cements him as a force to be reckoned with. It's also interesting to note that Myers was played by 3 different actors. For most of the film, Nick Castle donned the mask. However, at the end of the film, Tony Moran and Tommy Lee Wallace substituted for Castle, with Tony as Myers when the mask is taken off, and Wallace taking over during the infamous closet scene. Even with all these separate actors, Myers still remains a consistent character, and you never notice the change in actors. That is very hard to pull off, but they did it brilliantly. In addition to this, with the exception of one scene where he was directed to examine a body like a butterfly collection, the only direction Castle was given was to walk from point A to point B and not to act. They wanted to give the illusion of this alien creature, and it really worked for the character. While Myers does steal the show, the rest of the characters are all interesting enough to carry the rest of the film. Dr. Sam Loomis, played by Donald Pleasance, only appears in parts of the film, but his character is rather important. As Myers' psychiatrist, Loomis feels responsible for Myers. He's worked closely with Myers for all these years, and he knows there's no way of curing him. In fact, I think Loomis is the only one who suspects the truth about Myers, that he really isn't human. There's a very brilliant scene where Loomis talks about meeting Myers when he was young and explains just why he's dangerous as he talks about Myers' devil's eyes. Loomis knows that Myers is pure evil, but nobody seems to believe him, and everyone seems to blame him for Myers' escape, even though Loomis was the one doing all the work. I highly recommend looking this scene up, as his acting is simply superb. He's an interesting character, and I really hope the sequels focus more on him, because he's the only one, aside from Laurie, who knows what's really going on, and that makes him a lot more compelling than some of the side characters in the film. Loomis also works really well in the film because of just how intelligent he is. When Myers escapes, he does his best to protect the people around him first because he knows he can't take the killer head on. After failing to convince the police to help immediately after, he travels to Myers' old house because he knows that's exactly where he'd go first. He manages to get a local police officer to help him search. However, once again, the police prove useless, and Loomis ends up being the only person in the film to notice Myers' initial attack. He comes in at the last minute and saves Laurie just when Myers is about to pick her off. He might not have killed Myers, but he becomes a certified badass over the course of the film. The scenes with Loomis really help improve the pacing of the film, and Loomis himself adds a more personal connection to the monster. Laurie isn't really connected to Myers, but Loomis is, and he adds a bit more gravitas to everything that happens. Fun fact, both Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee were initially sought after to play Loomis, but turned down the role because they weren't being paid enough. Christopher Lee says it was the biggest mistake of his career, hands down. However, after adding $20,000 to his salary, Pleasance was chosen instead, and honestly, I can't see anyone else in this role. Pleasance just has this earnest nature that is simply infectious and drew me into the film. He's a key factor in why this film is so good, and while I do like Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, I don't think they would put in the same type of performance. Laurie is the only other major character in the film, and Jamie Lee Curtis does a great job with a character that doesn't stand out all that much. Lori is just an ordinary girl living in the town. She isn't connected to Myers, and she doesn't do anything that would anger Myers in particular. She just reminds him of his sister, and that's why he attacks her. However, Curtis manages to turn Lori into a hero in her own right. When she sees her friends dying around her, she doesn't think of herself first, but instead protects the two children she's babysitting. She then does her best to fend off Myers and does so in a very smart way. She first tries to lock herself inside her house and call the police, but Myers cuts the phone line. When he breaks in, Lori uses ordinary household objects as weapons and fights back. Even when she's chased into a closet, she takes a coat hanger and stabs Myers in the eyes to blind him. Again, Lori is a smart protagonist. I have seen some stupid lead characters before in slasher films. They either go back into the house to fight the killer after escaping from them, or they go outside where they have nothing to defend themselves. Here, there is a reason for everything that happens, and I never found myself yelling at the screen because she acted like an intelligent character. Again, there's nothing too special about her character, but Lori ends up winning points for not being dumb and for being a good person. Also, fun fact, Jamie Lee Curtis is the daughter of Janet Leigh, who is famous for being the woman killed in Psycho during the shower scene. Curtis was chosen partially for this connection, but after seeing her audition, she was chosen regardless because she was so good in the role. I have to agree, Curtis does a wonderful job as Lori, and I can't imagine anyone else in this particular role. Then again, I'm a huge fan of Curtis in general. She's been in some of my favorite films, such as Halloween, Freaky Friday, and of course, Knives Out. And I do love me some Knives Out. The rest of the characters are all very solid. Lori's friends may be irresponsible teenagers, but they aren't exactly horrible people. They just tended to make really bad decisions, such as not locking the doors and walking across the street without pants in the case of Annie. Even still, I wanted to see more of them in the film and felt slightly bad when they were killed off, which I can't say of many modern films. Cough, Saw 2, cough. The children aren't in much of the film either, and they're mostly there to introduce the concept of the boogeyman, but I think their characters do serve a purpose. They are there as symbolic parallels to Lori and Loomis. These are two kids who readily believe in the boogeyman and who take Halloween seriously. They are spared Myers' wrath, but they see their fears justified and brought to life just as Lori and Loomis have. Even though Lori and Loomis have grown up and dismissed their belief in the boogeyman, the fear still remains and they live out their fears just as the children do. I also find it interesting that the children are watching Forbidden Planet and The Thing from Another World on TV. This is funny to me because Carpenter would later go on to create his own version of The Thing, and this feels a bit like foreshadowing, even if he didn't realize it at the time. Pretty interesting stuff. Okay, I get it. The thunderstorm is getting worse. Can you please quit it with all the spooky thunder and lightning, please? It's really starting to make me a bit scared, to be honest. Although, admittedly, it's not a bad atmosphere for the review. Speaking of which, now we come to a key aspect of Halloween, the atmosphere. More than any other horror film I've seen, Halloween excels in the most important areas of horror: cinematography, musical score, and lighting. While the shots aren't quite as stylized as in Saw, everything is expertly filmed in this movie. Not only can you understand everything that happens, since there's none of that god-awful shaky cam that's become so popular these days, but it's filmed completely from the perspective of the killer. The majority of the film is shot in a way to make you feel like the killer stalking the main characters. Most of the shots are filmed on moving tracks or steady cam, so you follow these characters as they walk around the town and the camera turns and tilts as if from the gaze of a stalker. every single shot is carefully framed and planned to make you observe these characters in an uncomfortable way, and it works perfectly for the atmosphere. There's also a brilliant scene in the very beginning where we see Myers claim his first victim. We are directly put into the perspective of Myers as he watches a house, sneaks inside, grabs a knife from the kitchen, and kills his sister with it. The entire scene was filmed in one unending take and remains my favorite part of the entire film. While sharp viewers will be able to notice 2 subtle cuts, this is because the scene was filmed 3 separate times and they piece together the best takes. We briefly see how Myers operates through his own eyes, and in a way, we become the killer. We become the monster, and that is a chilling thought in and of itself. However, the true brilliance comes when Myers' parents take off his mask outside and we see he is only 6 years old as the shot pans backwards across the street. That reveal still gets me every single time. At the time, nobody would expect a 6-year-old to commit such a heinous crime, and even today, it's a lot to take in, especially because it shows that Myers was either born evil or was possessed by the boogeyman at that point. These scenes were both done with experimental new camera technology that allowed for steady camera work without the use of a dolly, which would have been much more time-consuming than they could afford. They worked with what they had and somehow made these scenes come together seamlessly, even though each of these opening shots used up an entire reel of film. It's this attention to detail that helped to make Halloween such a memorable film, and to this day, the cinematography astounds me with how good it is. However, none of this cinematography would work without the brilliant musical score of the film. In fact, when they were test screening the rough cut of Halloween, the score wasn't finished yet, and most of the people who viewed it said they were bored by the film. When they added the score in later, these same people said that Halloween was the scariest film they had ever seen, and I can't help but agree. This score is brilliant. Carpenter composed the score himself in only 3 days, and it all just fits together like a puzzle piece. The theme of the film is creepy and unsettling, and the rest of the music takes this motif and fully embraces it. This music is perfect for Halloween and makes the cinematography stand out even more. In addition to this, the lighting in this movie is simply superb. The way they shadow Myers when he's far away to make him look like just a shape is chilling. When Laurie walks towards the house to start the big reveal of all the kills, her face is slowly covered in shadow as she gets closer to the darkness. It all works so damn well, and I kept saying this as I watched this film for the second time. What more can I say about Halloween? It's a classic film. It works on just about every level. I've heard some people say it's too slow, but honestly, I think it's because horror is too fast these days. These modern films move a mile a minute and never let you catch your breath, which some people might prefer. I much prefer a slow build to a big payoff because by then the tension has built to the point where even the smallest action frightens you. But maybe that's just me. In any case, I give Halloween 1978 my highest stamp of approval, with both Kana and Chiaki endorsing this film. It is just that good. Halloween was formerly owned by Compass International Pictures, although the company is known today as Trancas International Films. They hold all distribution rights for the franchise and have produced all 11 current films and are set to produce more in the coming years, although the release of the 12th film, Halloween Kills, has been pushed to 2021 in order to provide a safer movie-going experience to audiences given the human malware that has forced everything to shut the hell down. I'm not entirely sure who made the final decision, but Carpenter and film director David Gordon Green made the announcement on Twitter, and I would be very surprised if Carpenter didn't fight for the extension given his history with the franchise. I applaud them for this decision, although it is rather ironic that a movie called Halloween Kills wants to avoid killing moviegoers on Halloween. In any case, I haven't seen any of the sequels yet, but I do hope they are as good as this one, because this is a high bar to set this early on in a franchise, and it would suck if none of the sequels live up to the first. Okay, I don't know who you are, but show yourself. I have a copy of the Halloween Blu-ray, and I'm not afraid to use it. Oh god, please don't kill me. Alright, review Fate Stay Night, I'll do it. Hannah?
Gotcha!
Wow, great job, Connor. That worked like a charm.
What just happened? Did you two plan all of this?
Well, not all of it. The power outage was a lucky accident. But we did plan to freak you out in an attempt to get you to review Fate. I asked Connor to help me out in exchange for a copy of today's menu for the Emir family due to all the food that's in the show. Also, she licked my hand.
It's so fluffy! It tasted nice! But not as nice as that food is going to taste. Oh, also, I got you, Mommy. Now you're the scaredy cat. This is the part where I dab, right?
Well, if you wanna, although we can't do that with your puppet rig.
Fine. Well, I'm dabbing in spirit.
Okay, you two are the worst. The literal worst. I hope you know that. Anyway, we will discuss this later. Right now, I have a video to finish.
And then you'll be doing Fate?
Well,
You said you'd do it.
Look, I will. I'll review Fate. But first, I'd just like to review a few more things that I want to talk about. Are you happy? I'm doing it.
Okay, I can live with that. I mean, it's not like there's anything stopping you from reviewing anything other than Fate, so I'll just be waiting here for when you finally do it. Ciao.
Hey, Mommy. Can I read the last 2 paragraphs to sign us off? Please.
Sure, why not? I need to rest after the heart attack you two gave me.
Move over. It's kinda time. For any of you humans out there watching, hi. If you want to find Halloween, it's pretty easy to find these days. Mommy got it for $7 online, which is super cheap for everything you get on the Blu-ray. In addition to the movie, which is super fun to watch on a spooky night like this, it also contains a full-on behind-the-scenes documentary that is just really cool. Please go buy it, or I'm gonna cry, and you don't want me to cry, do you? With all that being said, Mommy is Xena the Warrior Princess, the cutest of buns, and she will see you all next time. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you can join the Bun Squad and be a bunny like me. We watch all of Mommy's videos and look adorable doing it. Also, be sure to hit the bell to be notified of every new video. If you don't, I'm gonna go to your house and knock over your soda. Have a good day, everybody. Bye!
Happy Halloween, everyone! And remember, the real treat is only just beginning, though. I hope you all stay tuned, because I have something even more delicious planned for Zenith coming real soon.
I know you're there, Zen.
Oh, you're no fun, Philip.
Hero になりたいのプップップ願い口にする愛に配 wanna your